Sometimes people aren't keen on paper piecing because they feel like it's too time consuming. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not a super quick technique. We're not going to zip through something in 5 seconds flat, but there are a few things we can do to make it a little bit faster and streamline the process a bit. If we haven't met, I'm Christy Lee from Quiet Play, and foundation paper piecing is my favorite, and I'm on a mission to make it your favorite too. Okay, well, that's a lofty goal, but I'm going to try. So let's start first with tips to speed it up. I've been doing this for, 12, 14 years now. And these are the top 3 things that I do to make it all just a little bit faster. If you're looking for something a little bit more in depth than this just brief overview of my favorite 3 tips, go check out my course, Foundation Paper Piecing Made Easy, in-depth videos, patterns, everything you need, link below. Otherwise, top 3 tips headed your way. First tip might seem fairly obvious, but mark your templates. So we start doing this before we even start sewing. If you have your templates marked with which fabric goes where, it's going to make it a lot quicker when it comes time for the second tip that I'm going to share with you. So print off your template ready to go. I've got a little tomato here. It's quite simple because there's only 2 colors. However, if you're doing some more complex ones, there'll be lots of colors and you 100% want to mark your templates. I have a picture of the pattern here of the assembly instructions so that I can see where the lines fit on each of the sections. So you can see this is the mirror image to here. A is on the left, then B. Over here, A, B. That's because when we piece it, our fabric is going on this side. We sew on here, fabric is on here, and this is where our pattern will appear. So our pattern will match the assembly direction. Okay, so to mark it, just have a look at your colors. Sometimes your patterns are shaded. These ones have some shading in them, and you can just match it up to here. So in section A, I can see over here there is 1 leaf. So I will just put a G on there for green. Just whatever works as a reminder for you to mark your templates. Write the word, draw a little star, whatever works. And then obviously I can see on B, I have these 2 for green leaves. So I mark up my template, follow down to C, nice and easy. I often scribble all over mine. And then, or I'll draw arrows like this to go, these are all red. Then my template is all marked up, ready to sew. You can also mark your background in there if you need to, but again, this one's a fairly simple pattern, so I don't need to go any much further with marking the templates. On to tip number 2, and this is where we're going to get our fabrics ready to sew in order at the machine. This speeds it up so much than cutting your fabrics as you go. So get all your fabrics cut, ready, and you'll be like zipping through your foundation piecing in no time. So you can see I have my fabrics here, green for the leaves, red for the tomato, and I'm using yellow for the background. I have cut mine into strips. You can see they're all different width of strips. What you do is have a look at your template, give it a bit of a measure. Now the biggest leaf here is this one in the middle. You can see even with seam allowance top and bottom, it's about 1 inch. I've cut my strips to about 1.5 inches to give me plenty of space. So that way it'll cover seam allowance on all 4 sides. Backgrounds, again, measure. Have a look at what the biggest piece probably is. The width, probably this one. And if I factor in seam allowance, it's at least 1.5. I've been a bit generous and I've cut 2. I'd rather cut it a bit wider than not wide enough. The tomato has smaller pieces. Again, go for your biggest one. So if I measure that, remembering I need at least 1/4 inch top, bottom on all sides for my seam allowance. So that'll probably be 2.5. I happen to have a scrap that's quite wide at 4.5, so that will work plenty well. So you've got your fabric cut into strips. Now we're going to rough cut them. Put them into sections. Let's start with the A section first. Now I just do this by trusty old scissors. So I find A1, it's a green leaf because I marked it with G. Lay your fabric over and check how big it's going to be. Now I know it's going to be wide enough on all sides. Rough cut it. That will fit beautifully. That's A1. Now A2, A3 and A4 are quite small little sections of fabric. I can cut it like that and I know that's going to fit. A2, A3, A4, I'll just give it its own little chunk there. And then A5. Look, I could make this work here and here. It's wide enough, but I don't like taking chances of being a bit short. So I would probably give it plenty of width, make it sure it's a 1/4 inch here, and then I cut. You can see my fabric is quite a bit bigger than the section I'm going to need. I do that deliberately because I hate unpicking. So go bigger every time. So much easier than coming back and unpicking afterwards. Then, so that's A5, A6 again, measure, make sure it's going to fit, rough cut, and there's A6. Now, I flip them upside down. They're in order from A1 through to A6. So when it comes for me to sew, I'm just grabbing this and putting it straight down. Super fast, super easy, so much better than cutting your fabric on each section as you go. Now, sometimes I would just do a section at a time. Other times I'll go through and cut the section for the whole lot. If I'm doing a pattern that has lots of repeating shapes in it, so they're all symmetrical, I'll cut multiples at the same time. But pre-cut your fabric, stack it in order. I can't emphasize that part enough. You don't want it just all random scraps sitting all over your desk. Have it in order, ready to go. Pile it up next to your machine, and it's going to be so much quicker when it comes time to piece your fabric. And again, I'm just rough cutting with my trusty old scissors because it's so much easier than going and cutting with the rotary cutter. Faster too, and that's why we're here, right? We want tips to speed up foundation paper piecing. This is probably one of my biggest ones. I'm cutting for the bigger section here, the C section for the tomato. I wanted to show you, you can see I've got little triangles here, C9 and C10. That one's a bit smaller than the other, but roughly we're probably going to use the same amounts of fabric because we're rough cutting. So double your fabric and like that by folding it in half and then cut 2 for 1, my friends. We can do that, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, 16. Speeds it up even a little bit more. So you go through, cut all your templates, all your fabrics ready for your templates, stack them next to your sewing machine, ready to piece. Tip number 3 comes about when we're actually piecing and sewing. Now, it's actually a little bit of a 2 for 1. However, your mileage may vary because you might like to be a little bit more precise than I am. This is the Lazy Girl's Guide to Foundation Paper Piecing, and I like to speed things up wherever I can. So this is what I do. Doesn't mean it works for you, and that's totally fine. Take what works for you, leave the rest. So I have just added the B7 section on here, the last one. You can see it's quite messy because we're going to fold back the fabric, and that's when we need to trim this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the edge. So this is where the Lazy Girl's Guide comes in play, because guess what? I just use my trusty scissors and I eyeball a 1/4 inch and I trim it right there at the sewing machine as I'm piecing. Now, you are very welcome to take it to your mat with your rotary cutter, use an add a 1/4 ruler, trim it precisely. But for me, I'm like, no one's going to see those seams, so I am totally okay with scissor cutting. You can also, of course, put a mat and cutter next to your sewing machine and do it that way. I just like to use scissors. It's quick, it's easy. Right, so now this one is, I recommend whether you're a lazy paper piecer like me or you like to be super precise, I recommend this for everybody. Finger presser, I've talked about it before, super helpful. Keep it by your sewing machine. So once you have trimmed back your fabric section like that, open your piece out and you use your finger presser to smooth out the seam. Now, the reason we do that means you don't have to take it to the ironing board every time for every seam that you press back. Use your finger presser, or you can use a roller as well, or even a tailor's clapper if you'd like. Finger pressers, small, convenient, super easy, super fast. So I would recommend doing that. Again, I've got one of those cute little mini irons and a little mat, so potentially I could have it set up next to my sewing machine and press as I go, but I'm kind of in the habit of using the finger presser and I find it super easy, and I don't have to worry about knocking the iron over by mistake either. So definitely use one of those. Use the scissors where you can to trim, and you're pretty much set. Those are probably my best tips. Oh, I wanted to say, now I talked about rough cutting and bigger pieces of fabric, and I know there are people out there who'll go, well, gosh, that's a lot of fabric wastage. So what I would like to point out there is what's left of the fabric I use for when I'm piecing something else. I actually keep a pile of my offcuts Here's some I prepared earlier. So you can see they're all cut into strips. They're ones that were left from my previous foundation paper piecing attempts. And then when I'm looking to piece the next thing, I just dive through the scraps and just find those. Foundation paper piecing creates a lot of scraps, but it's also great for using up a lot of scraps. So those are my tips. I hope they help speed up foundation paper piecing just a little bit so you can get more sewing time into your day. Happy sewing!